my contractions stopped. And then all of a sudden I could hear the change in tone in my husband. He started crying, and it was not, I'm about to meet my baby cry. It was nervous or scared, but I could just tell something was not right. And he was, you've got to push now. I couldn't push. I still had no contractions. And from that point on, my contractions never came back. She said, I need to cut an episiotomy right now. And I remember just freaking out. It's gonna hurt so bad. I'm so terrified. And she it was very serious. She's like, you need to give me consent right now to cut. I thought that when she cut, my baby would come right out. I didn't really understand why she was cutting. Nobody was explaining to me what was wrong. I had no clue what was going on. I never was concerned because nobody made me concerned.
Welcome to the Keeping Your Power Real Talk on Resilience podcast. I'm your host, Tracidoula. I'm a family and birth advocate, a mentor, and your personal encourager. I wanted to create the space for individuals, families, and professionals who are done with just surviving and want to rise. Because when everything feels like it's falling apart, the one thing the world can't take from you is your power. And that's where resilience begins. It's not just riding the waves or surviving the storms. It's about how to overcome the challenges. So whether you're in the thick of it or reflecting on where you've been, pull up a chair and let's navigate the hard conversations and the beautiful stories that together we can be honest and use empathy and have a desire to grow, all while, of course, keeping your power in the process. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Real Talk on Resilience. I'm Tracidoula, your podcast host, and I'm really pretty excited about the conversation I'm going to have with Ashley today. But I want to make sure that I extend a trigger warning because we are going to talk about infant loss in birth. That was very unexpected. So, Ashley, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Of course, I'm so excited. I've watched your videos throughout my pregnancy and everything, so it was pretty cool when you reached out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the unexpected things, hit us in the face. And when I also found you on TikTok scrolling along and was very intrigued by how you were able to tell your story. So I think that today is going to be very impactful for our audience and for people. And I'm just very thankful that you are providing space for that and for the audience. You just went through something super unexpected in a very vulnerable time in your life. So let's just start with who you are and introduction.
So my name is Ashley, and I lost my daughter Everly at 5 days old after a very traumatic labor. We did have a planned home birth.
So tell me about where you got started, because this is going to be we're just going to go step by step. I don't want to miss anything, because I think it's very important for people to know what goes into planning a home birth. So tell me at the beginning, was it something that you always wanted to do, or how did you come to that decision?
I definitely found home birth before I got pregnant, but I hadn't done a ton of digging into what that was until I actually found out I was pregnant. So I think I had watched a bunch of stuff on home births. I remember sitting and just watching a ton of YouTube videos of different people having a home birth and what that kind of looked like. And I just kept seeing things like all this hospital trauma that people say that they have, and just C-sections really scared me, and I didn't want to feel pushed for that or pushed for an induction. So it sounded like the right thing for me. And then once I actually got pregnant, that's when I started searching midwives in our area. And I think I asked in a local moms group if anybody had worked with a midwife specifically in home birth, and got a bunch of recommendations that way. And then also just doing Google reviews and stuff like that. So that's how I landed on the practice that we chose to go to.
So was your husband on board with the home birth idea? I know it's sometimes that partners we string them along a little bit. Was your husband on board at the beginning? And this is your first too. Let me go back. So this was your first pregnancy and planning. So was it a family kind of decision or?
Yeah, I think when I brought the idea to him, he was like, "Oh, that seems out of the norm, you know?" But then as I showed him the stuff that I was watching on it, we watched documentaries and a bunch of stuff like that. He was totally on board. He was like, "Yes, like I don't see why a home birth wouldn't be the right choice, you know? Like it seems beautiful. You're in the comfort of your own home, like all these things." So yeah, he was definitely all for it.
So where you are, which is so nice, isn't it nice when when partners are, they're listening, and even if they're uncomfortable, I get a lot of calls from moms that are like, Tracy, I want to do this, but my husband partner is not comfortable with it, and we get them the information that they need, but the belief system is really nice when they come over pretty easily. When you decided to contact this midwife, well, first, let's talk about the legal ability to have a home birth where you are. So, who do you have to have for a home birth? Is it a certified nurse midwife or a certified practicing midwife?
When I went into it, I knew there was different kinds of midwives, and I knew for me that we wanted a certified nurse midwife. So that's just what I sought out. It wasn't until after I actually delivered that I started like looking into what the laws kind of were. And from my understanding here, it's not, you don't have to have a nurse midwife. You can have other types of midwives, which I think is also very confusing to people. They
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm-hmm.
always understand the difference between like a lay midwife versus a certified nurse midwife because the training for that to me is completely different, which is why we wanted to make sure we went with a certified nurse midwife.
So let's just educate on the different types of midwives. They're not actually the word lay midwife really needs to kind of be erased because all midwives really have education. So the certified nurse midwives are nurses before they're midwives. So they do the nursing degree and then they go back to midwifery school. So certified practicing midwives also have the same type of education. They just don't have a nursing license. So it's, a lay midwife would be a midwife who doesn't have a whole lot of education in either of those letters. And I think that that's very confusing for people is certified nurse midwives don't necessarily have more experience than a certified professional midwife. And that's why it's really important to sit down with the midwife, ask them like what their experience is, because I think education can be an illusion sometimes. Or, hey, where did you get your schooling? Or what are your credentials? Because that can be an illusion sometimes. And like where I am at, certified nurse midwives are they don't do home births under that license. And so it's very intriguing to me when people talk about what their laws are in their states and how people find their midwives and why and how. So this goes to the importance of interviewing your midwife and what is their, yes, educational level, but what is their emergency skill level? Because I think that we have pushed home birth and midwives so much because of maybe somebody had a traumatic hospital birth, or we all know that home birth and midwives or midwives in general can have really great outcomes. But since we're shifting that, I think that the interview process or the asking questions process, just like we would with OBs, is not there. So what kind of questions did you ask your midwife when you sat down with her, or was it just a phone call?
So we did like a video call with her, and I will say the practice that we went to had four main midwives. So we met with like the head of it, like she was the one who started the practice, and she had been a midwife for such a long time. She had home births. She told us about her experience. She used to work in a hospital, just all these different things that she had done. And so we felt really comfortable with her, especially after getting all the recommendations like firsthand from people in our community that had used her. Something that I didn't think about until afterwards was that we just interviewed her. because she was
Mm,
the one on the phone call
mm,
at the first meeting, and I knew that there was the other midwives in the practice, but it just never clicked to me like throughout pregnancy as we were meeting each one to re-interview them. Like I just felt comfortable with the one, so I was like, okay, well she hired them, so I'm sure that they all have great credentials as well.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of where like I feel like care could have lacked is that they all
Mhm.
four have a different background of what they have trained with, and they range in how long they've been practicing too. Like the one that we talked with has been practicing longer than any of the rest. And the one that happened to be on call the day that I went into labor was the one with the least amount of experience and had only been practicing for a handful of years. So I think
Mhm.
that really made a huge difference. So I just didn't even think to interview like the other ones. I just
Right.
assumed that it was all on the same level. And once you're already like, 20 weeks by time you meet one of them, maybe you're not thinking
Right.
to ask those questions again.
Right. Trust by association is what I call that.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point, Ashley. Very, very good point. And I think it's the same with OBs too. We get in these really huge practices and we start seeing all these different doctors and you don't know who's going to, deliver you, right? So the relationships are hard to build too. And you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You just went into it thinking, okay, well, I trust this one person and this is a great practice and, all of those things. So let's put that aside for just a second. Let's talk about your labor and going into labor. So was your pregnancy in general just, run of the mill, uneventful? Did you have anything going on? Because you have to be pretty low risk to have a home birth in general.
Yeah. So, which I think that too kind of differs on the midwife of what they're willing to risk at a home birth. Ours, I know the big ones were you couldn't, if you had preeclampsia, you couldn't, if your baby was breech. Those were pretty much ingrained in my mind the whole pregnancy. I was like, hey, don't get these things. Like, if you want to have your home birth, you can't have those. So yeah, my pregnancy was super boring, which was great. We did struggle to conceive, so I had a ton of early ultrasounds at our fertility clinic until we like graduated at like 10 or 12 weeks, and that is when I transferred over to the midwife care. And even with them, like I was getting regular prenatal care. I think I had asked for the 12-week ultrasound just because I was being like overly wanting to see my baby. So we did that. Everything was fine. Anatomy scan. I think that too is a big thing that people think home birth equals no prenatal care. And that's
Right.
just not the case. I had the same schedule as anybody who went to an OB. Like I had the same amount of appointments, the same
Yeah.
amount of ultrasounds, all the blood work. Like I was getting things checked throughout. So, yeah, everything was fine. I didn't have gestational diabetes. Anatomy scan was fine. I had a growth scan later in the third trimester. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
all pretty boring.
Yeah, I do think that people think that when you're having a home birth that you've had no prenatal care and you're just going to go out in the middle of a daisy field and be in labor, which I think somebody else on the podcast said, well, that would be great, you know, to just go out anywhere and just give birth, willy nilly. But the prenatal care, I think that people just think, oh no, if you're going to go to a midwife, they're not going to do all the testing, they're not going to do all the ultrasound, they're not going to do the exact same care as the OB. I think that that's one thing when somebody calls me and says, hey, what are my options? That's what I say the majority of the time is, how do you feel about home birth? Well, I don't know, because I'm like, you're going to get the exact same testing. You're going to get the same indications for if something needs to happen. You're going to get those things. So people feel, more comfortable with that. So did you feel like really like, oh, okay, this is the different care in that you're getting a little bit more time. You're getting a holistic outlook of nothing is wrong until it is, more kind of a hands-off kind of thing. Did you feel like your relationship with, all of them was, trusting and caring and that they were looking for what they needed to look for?
Yeah, I felt like all of my appointments went really well, and I did get that more personal feeling that I think I would have gotten in an OB office, even though there was four of them. We definitely had, the ones that we felt closer with than others, but overall, like we never had a bad experience with any. I always felt like they were really on top of like making sure everything was okay while still kind of keeping the hands off. But yeah, I felt like my care was exactly what I would have wanted.
Great, great. Well, tell me about your labor leading up. So, did you take classes? Did you take like a childbirth? Did they offer childbirth education or, or anything like that? So, did you get all the like bells and whistles from their practice?
Yeah, so our practice actually required that you take a birthing class of some sort. You could take whatever you wanted, but you had to take a class if you were a first-time parent, which I actually really liked. I remember being like a little annoyed, like, "Ugh, I don't need this. Like, I already know." But I think that's a great thing that they required you to do that. And you also were required to take some sort of breastfeeding or lactation class as well. So we did do both of those things, and we actually took our birthing class through our doula's
Good.
office. So they
Yeah.
offered one there. So
Nice.
that is
So,
what
you
we
did have a
chose.
doula.
We did, and she was
Okay.
amazing. Love doulas.
Yeah, the midwife I work with the most sends her people her hospital because she's both a certified nurse midwife and a certified practicing midwife. So that's why I know so much. And of course, I've been here, doing this for 26 years where I am, and when we're trying to, improve the laws around midwifery care or home birth, I've been involved in all of that. In working with her now, she just sends everybody to me for both. So it's also a requirement in her practice that all people who, not just for her first timers, but anybody that's going to have their first home birth has to have, because home birth you have to prepare for too. I mean, it's not just going in and lighting candles and filling up a pool,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Um, and I don't think people realize that either. Oh, I'm just going to have a home birth and everything is going to fall into place. No, I feel like you actually have to prepare a little bit more because you can't just ask for pharmaceutical pain management. You have to wrap your head around feeling safe and all of those things. So it sounded like you were preparing and had a really strong team. Did you hire a doula, if somebody just told you to, or how did you come, to that philosophy of I'm going to have a doula on my team?
Yeah, so it was actually a requirement as well for a
Okay.
first time that you had to have a doula. And I, again, reached out to a local mom group and just typed, like, has anyone had a doula that they really love? And then I also asked our midwives for recommendations, and everyone was recommending the same one. And I'm so, like, she was literally amazing. I want her for every single one of my
Right.
labors in the future. So I think everyone should get a doula. You don't think that you need it sometimes,
Yeah.
but you need it in the moment. It's so nice to have the extra support.
Yeah, yeah, and the education
Yeah.
and the things that your midwife might know, but they might not think about. Because even Kim, when she's like, I didn't even think about, certain things, just certain things that that we're going to tell you. So fabulous. So everybody was walking and rolling. Did your doula go to some of your prenatal appointments with you to have like some discussions about like what was going to happen or what your wishes were?
She didn't go to any appointments with us. We would just kind of check in with her after, and then we did do like a video call with me, her, my husband, all that, closer to the end to kind of go over like all the fine details of what our birth plan, what we wanted it
Yeah.
to look like. So.
Yeah, I call that a labor rehearsal. Yeah, I do the same thing. So tell me, let's just spring forward into your labor. So what did that look like? Did you have like a bunch of pre-labor activity happen like most first-time moms do?
No, I remember I was working up until I was going to go into labor. And I remember going to work on my due date, and people would be like, "Oh, when are you due?" I'm like, "Today." Like, she's not coming though. Like, she's comfy in there. So that
How
was
are
my
you
last day.
feeling? How are you feeling at that point though?
huge. I mean,
Okay.
I still felt like, I thought it was going to be worse than it was. I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to 42 weeks, but I can keep going. But that was my last day of work. I was like, I'm not going to go after my due date. Like at that point, I was just starting to get a little bit more swollen, which the midwives had said is normal. At the end, I didn't swell like super early or anything like that. It was literally just like the last 2 or 3 weeks that my ankles
Good.
were getting swollen and I was like on my feet, so it made sense. So
And you said
nothing
you
crazy.
were working at this point. You
Yeah.
said,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
It was kind of expected, but there was nothing else going on except for that. I never really had any cramping. I did start getting membrane sweeps
Okay.
at 38 weeks because
Okay.
I had had 1 or 2 high blood pressure readings in office
Okay.
throughout pregnancy. And so they were like, it can't hurt. Like, we do the sweep if you want to. And then if she wants to come after that, she can. She did not want to. So, um, I think we did 2 sweeps. And then it got to the day after my due date, and I had an appointment with the midwives. And I remember taking my blood pressure before I went into the office because after I had the one high blood pressure reading in office, it did go back down while I was in the office same day. But they were like, just take it once a day at home and just let us know like what it is every day. So I would message them every day what it was. That morning I took it before I went to my appointment and it was much higher than it had been. I want to say it was like 140s over like 90 something, which they
Mm.
had told me they wanted the lower number below 90 and the top one, I think below like 140 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I knew when I saw it, I was like, this is much higher than it has been. And so I went into the office. I'm like, okay, I probably just psyched myself out more. Now it's going to be even higher when I go in office because I'm going to be anxious.
Right.
I told them immediately, and I had also weighed myself that morning, and I had gained like 8 pounds or something
Wow.
crazy in just a
Wow.
couple of days. So I told them that with the high blood pressure reading. They took my blood pressure, and it was again very high. And they waited a minute or two, took it one more time to be sure. Again, very high. And they were like, I'm so sorry, but you need to go into labor and delivery, like at the hospital. And they were like, just saying, if it's preeclampsia, obviously you have to stay at the hospital. It's quicker for you to just go into labor and delivery, get the blood work, get the results, than it would be for us to like take your blood
Right.
in office, send it off, all
Right.
that. So I remember holding back tears in the office because I knew that labor was so close. And I was convinced that I had preeclampsia. I was like, okay, so everything I had just planned for these 40 weeks was just gone. And my husband, of course, like he had gone to pretty much every single appointment. And that is one that he didn't go to because we thought it was just going to be like a
Of course.
quick thing. So he's like, oh, I'm like, you don't need to take off work. It's fine. I get out to the car and I'm just like bawling my eyes out. And I'm calling him. I'm like, we have to go to the hospital. Like they said to pack a hospital bag, all this. So he's like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. I'm going to go home. So I went home, got our hospital bag all packed. Yeah, then we went over to a hospital. We did not go to the closest hospital to us. We went to one actually that has midwives still practicing.
Okay.
It's like midwife OB
Hmm.
mix. And
Hmm.
even though we hadn't seen anybody throughout the pregnancy, I just felt like since they knew midwife care, they would be a little bit more open to what I
Hmm.
could still keep in my birth plan if I wanted to.
Right.
So
Right.
we get there, they hook me up to the monitors, they do all the lab tests. I had to like pee in a cup, did the blood work, all of that. She was great on the monitors the whole time. They were taking my blood pressure every 15 minutes. All my lab work came back and no preeclampsia. So they were like, okay, I guess it's just gestational hypertension. That's what we're gonna diagnose you with right now. My blood pressure had come down while I was sitting there. I think we were there for maybe like 2 hours. And it had gone back down. So the midwife had told me when I left the office that day that if I did not have preeclampsia on the blood work, I could still have my home birth. And
Oh.
So I was like, okay, cool. And then they said I could call them, like from the hospital, because they said, you're past your due date. The hospital's going to tell you to stay and be induced regardless. So just know that. And so I went in knowing that. And yes, they did. They were like, we think you should be induced. Like, you're already a day past your due date. You have hypertension. Looking back, obviously, I wish more than anything I would have just done it, but it felt like such a blow in the moment of like everything I had planned just gone. And to me, I was like, okay, well, if the midwives say that I can leave and they're comfortable with a home birth, then like I guess that's what I'm gonna do is like stick to the plan. So I called them from labor and delivery, told them all the lab work and everything, and they were like, "Yep, that's fine, but we need to get this baby out like soon, you know?" So I went from the hospital back to the midwife office. They did a membrane sweep, and then they told me like it was already probably 7 o'clock at night at this point. They were like, in the morning, we think you should do the castor oil mix, which I know is a hot topic.
Mhm.
But I just
But
trusted
your
them.
midwife, but your midwives told you,
They did,
and your
yes.
midwife was probably going to come and check on you.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
they
So
weren't
I
telling you to
did,
just go drink it just to start labor. Yeah,
right.
that's the difference. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I, which I think was the whole point. They were like, this baby needs to come out. You already have
right.
hypertension. So I listened. The membrane sweep didn't really do anything. I felt a little crampy, but nothing happened overnight. And then in the morning, took the castor oil, called the midwives, let them know. And then that was around like 9 or 9:30 that I did the castor oil. And then I was just doing the mile circuit to try to like get things moving. I don't know,
Mhm.
just get baby in a
Yeah,
position.
yeah.
And I was doing the side lying on my bed with a peanut ball, and I felt this like pop, and I was like, is this what people talk about? Like, is that my water? And I
Wow.
stood up and felt a little trickle, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think it is. So I texted my doula, I texted the midwife on call number, and I said, I think my water just broke. And I had to get like a little Omniswab test for the fluid to make sure that it was my water that broke. So she had me do that and send her a picture, and it had broke. So I was like super excited, but I would say like less than 30 minutes to an hour, contractions started immediately. Like I had no cramping, and then my water broke and immediate contractions. And
Oh,
yeah,
that's a
it
lot.
was a lot. Yeah. So, and we
When your
had,
water breaks, there is no cushion anymore. Like,
yeah,
and we have so much amniotic fluid.
yeah.
Like, it's like keeps coming and it
Hmm.
keeps coming and it keeps coming. And if you're not experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions, cramping, any pre-labor idea of what a contraction is going to feel like,
Yeah.
Ashley, I can't even imagine
No,
how
I
that
had
hit you.
zero cramps. I mean, I was trying to like pump like milk to get myself to cramp, and I was getting nothing. So this was my first experience, and I just remember being like we had all of our supplies. We just kept them
Right.
in our spare room, and then we had like the tub and stuff that we were gonna blow up. And I'm like walking around, my husband's like sitting in our room just like watching TV, and I'm like looking at him, and I was like, get the stuff ready now. Like this is so much worse than I was expecting. Um and I called my doula, and I'm like just crying on the phone. I'm like, why is it like this? I thought that you had contractions and they started out like shorter, and then you had more breaks in between, and then it would get close together towards the end. And my labor was never like that. They were back to back to back to back the entire time. And I was just like, oh my God. I wasn't getting any breaks, and I was trying to time them on the app. And I remember being like, they were all over the place, but they were all like a minute long. And like, I couldn't even really tell when one was ending and one was beginning. Like,
Oh,
that's how
wow.
back to back. So I was like, please come to my house. Like,
I have clients that will do this, and it really is like on the lower side of normal,
yeah,
or like the common things that happen. And I'm like, I'm fired. I'm sorry. I'm fired. Your labor is just one of those weird, unexpected categories that we go over in class, but you never think
yeah.
that the abnormal contraction pattern is what's going to be. So your doula arrives and you are back to back contractions. How far along were you at this point? You were 40 and
40 and 2.
into. And most of the time, I'll throw in this that water breaking at the very beginning is again on the lower side of, that's kind of like the between 10 to 30% like range. It really usually doesn't happen that way. And for it to happen that way and you start rocking and rolling pretty quickly, side lane release and all of like the mile circuit, did that make your water break? In my experience, I'm going to say no. What it did do is it let your baby come down into your pelvis, and then it accelerated your labor because the baby was coming down. And this is where y'all will always see me say dilation means nothing. Wherever your baby is in your pelvis matters the most. And that's what was happening. Was baby was just being a really big overachiever.
Yeah. And I will say I was very on top of it my whole pregnancy. Every single night I would sit on my birth ball and I would do hip circles. I would do stretches. I was like, I'm
You.
going to do everything I can to make this labor
Good
quicker,
for you.
easier, all the things. And I do think that
Yeah.
that really helped as a first time mom, especially.
Yeah.
Um, so
Good
yeah,
for you.
but the water
Good for
breaking
you.
definitely was not ideal. But I had nothing to compare it to. So I was like, it's fine. I'd rather this than like have a labor where my water didn't break and then experience this and know
Exactly.
that I'm dealing with so much worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, my doula got here and I was just pacing the house. I had a towel between my legs, like with all the fluid, and just saying ow, like over and over again. That's all I was saying.
Yeah.
So she was walking with me and like trying to tell
Mom.
me different things I could do, and nothing felt good except for just pacing. So
Mhm.
that's literally all I did. And I was like, this hurts so much. I was like, I don't know if I could do this, which again, I knew that that's a thing people say when they're in
Mhm.
labor, but just the pain of it, I was not expecting it. I was expecting slower contractions coming on. So she could tell I was getting pretty discouraged, and she called the midwife and was like, I think you need to come. Like, she's just feeling really discouraged. We didn't know where I was. And then not having breaks between the contractions, we weren't sure how long this was going to take, but I do think it took everyone by surprise. Like, as a first time mom, people thought it was going to take a lot longer than it did for sure. So our midwife did show up, like an hour and a half or so later, and got her stuff set up. And at that point, I had moved upstairs to our bedroom because I was like terrified if it got any further along, I wouldn't make it up the stairs. So
Right.
I'm just pacing upstairs around, and she's like, let's check you, see where you are. I was like, okay. It was so terrible. I remember having to sit still long enough to like lay down for her to check how dilated I was. And then I was
Yeah.
like, don't tell me, because again, as a first time mom, you just hear people get so discouraged when they're going through all this
Yeah.
pain, and then like, oh, you're only like 3 centimeters dilated.
Right.
So I was like, do not tell me. Like, I don't want to be discouraged. And she was like, I don't think you're going to be discouraged. And I was like, fine, tell me. So she was like, you're already at a 7. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like that's amazing. So they had me like do a few more positions. I did get into the tub at that point.
Okay.
And I remember I was just rocking in the tub. Like I still just could not sit still and get comfortable. It wasn't giving me that relief that I had seen
Mhm.
so many moms say it gives
Mhm.
them. And I think that
Mhm.
was just my contraction pattern. It was
Mhm.
like, I'm sure it's very relaxing in other circumstances, but nothing was helping my contractions. So I think I stayed in there for probably like an hour or so. And then she checked me again while I was in the tub, and she was like, you're at a 10, except for I still had a little bit of a lip of my cervix
Okay.
there. So she just had me kind of like lean forward to try to get the lip to go away. So that's what I did for a few contractions. And then I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. And everyone was like, oh, we know what this means. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, like I know the difference. I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. So I got myself out of the tub and I went to the toilet, and then I ended up laboring on the toilet for a little bit. And the midwife had suggested that I stand there and like lift one leg up on a stool for a few contractions and then switch into the other leg. Like we were just trying to get rid of the lip so that I could
Yeah.
push. And she checked again. She's like, hey, the lip's gone. Like you can push whenever you want. So I did do a couple pushes on the toilet. And I remember people they were counting to 10, like just how you see in every birth video ever. And I remember in my head, I'm like, why are they counting? Like, I'm gonna stop when I want to stop because I
Right.
can't hold
What
my
are we
breath that
doing?
long. So I think I was like doing it till like 7 seconds or something. I was like, I
Okay.
can't hold my breath till 10. Like,
Yeah.
what? Um, so it was fine. And then they
Were you feeling like you had to push? Like why the
my body
encouragement?
was doing it on its own. So
Okay.
that's
Okay.
when I forgot about that part. So when I was in the tub, I was like involuntarily pushing, like
Okay.
having the reflex. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when the midwife could like tell. And she's like, are you doing that? Or is your body doing that? And I was like, I'm not doing it. And that's when she said I was at a 10, but the lip was still there. So my body was still doing that. Not every contraction, but frequently for sure. So I was pushing with it. And again, I just had all these ideas in my head. Like, people are like, oh, the pushing was the best part. It felt so good to be able to push. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I did not enjoy pushing at all, but I kept telling myself, I'm like, this is how you get your baby out. And that's my doula was great the whole time. She was like, it brings you one step closer to your baby. She just kept reminding me every single contraction, like, this is a little bit closer to meeting your baby. This is what you're supposed to be doing, which really helped a ton. So we moved from the toilet and I wanted to get back in the tub, but for whatever reason, the midwife was like, let's get on hands and knees on the bed and just do some pushing there. And so that's where I ended up delivering. I never got back in the tub. So I was leaning over my peanut ball on the bed and just pushing, and nobody's really saying anything to me the whole
Yeah.
time other than counting.
Okay.
Um, Somebody said when they saw her hair, but other than that, like, I remember feeling like this must be the Ring of Fire because it felt like that. But nobody was saying anything that she was like head out or how far out she was necessarily. Um, so I just kept pushing. Like, every contraction I had, I would just push. And then, like, at some point, I don't know when exactly, it was very quiet. Like, literally nobody was talking, I remember. But my doula had gone and gotten some of our family members that we said was okay to have in the room. Like, I wanted people not near me until she was actually coming out, and then people could be present for that. So I never knew anyone even came in. That's how quiet everyone was, which is great until things started to go wrong. And I just remember sitting there and I'm still like leaning forward, so nobody's in front of me. It's just like the headboard of our bed, and the midwife is behind me. She has an assistant midwife with her. My doula's on the other side of me. My husband's next to me. And I just start yelling out. I'm like, my contractions stopped. Like, it was so weird because it was so back to back the whole time. And they were like, you just keep pushing, keep pushing. And I was like, my contractions stopped. Like, I can't, like, I'm trying to push, nothing's happening. I'm very ineffective without a contraction. And then all of a sudden I could hear the change in tone in my husband. He started crying, and it was not like a I'm about to meet my baby cry. It was nervous or scared. Like, I don't really know, but I could just tell something was not right. And he was like, you've got to push now. Like, you need to keep pushing. And I was trying as hard as I could. And I was like, I have no contractions. They're gone. And I was not thinking anything of it. I was like, surely this could be normal because nobody's saying anything to me. And
When
in movies and stuff like that, you see sometimes like it looks like they have a contraction and then they wait a few minutes and then they have another one. And I heard somewhere that like sometimes when you're like at that stage, like contractions can space out a little bit.
mm-hmm.
So I never was concerned because nobody made me concerned. Eventually, the midwife was like, okay, flip onto your back. And so I flipped over really quick, and then I pushed my legs back and they were like, keep pushing, keep pushing. I couldn't push, like, I still had no contractions, and from that point on, my contractions never came back. She said, I need to cut an episiotomy right now, and I remember just freaking out. I, like, started crying. I was, like, it's gonna hurt so bad. I'm so terrified. And she like, it was very serious. I could tell. She looked at me. She's like, you need to give me consent right now to cut. And I was like, fine, whatever. I thought that when she cut, my baby would come right out. So I didn't really understand why she was cutting. Nobody was explaining to me what was wrong. I had no clue what was going on. So she cut and then she put both of her hands in there and tried to pull her out, and she couldn't get her out. And they had me like flipping back onto all fours, back onto my back. And then at some point, like, I'm not sure of the exact timeline here because it was just like so
Yeah.
much.
Mhm.
I looked over and there was a firefighter next to me, and he was just standing there. I think the fire truck had gotten here before the ambulance, so it was just him and another guy. They were just standing there, and I'm just laying on my back looking around. Still at this point, nobody has told me what's going on. Like, I have no
Oh,
clue
Ashley.
of anything that could have gone wrong. I did hear them put the Doppler on my belly when I had first said that I stopped feeling contractions, and I could hear her heart tones were much slower than they were at the beginning. But again, nobody raised any concern. So I was like, okay, it bounces back up, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I just assumed that. So yeah, eventually EMS, the rest of the team got there and they carry me down the stairs, legs wide open so that they could see her. I get in the ambulance, and thankfully, the closest hospital to us is only like 3 blocks away. It's very, very close, which is another thing that made us feel a little bit more comfortable with the home birth. We were like, okay, worst case scenario, the hospital's right there. And we were told, like, worst case scenario in our head was that I'm a first time mom and labor goes for a long time and you might get exhausted and need to go to the hospital. So that's what I was thinking was worst case for me to have to go to the hospital. I knew hemorrhaging was was a thing, but I trusted the midwives to catch it. And I knew they came with Pitocin and like things to control it. Never did I think I'd be transferring for something like this. And still, I don't think I was understanding the gravity of what was happening.
So
I'm
what was happening? Now looking back and knowing what you know now, what was happening and what position were you in and was she in when you left your house?
Yeah, so she was coming out totally normal.
Okay.
She had a shoulder dystocia is what was happening. So
Okay.
both of her shoulders were stuck inside of like above the pelvic bone still.
Okay.
And I believe her head was stuck right about where the chin was. So that's as far as her body could get out, because her shoulders were stuck. So I'm assuming the different, like, flipping back and forth was them trying to get her out. I think ultimately the issue was her size. It was missed on all of our ultrasounds and like prenatal appointments that she was measuring very big for her age. And I think that is the main contributor to what caused the shoulder dystocia to happen, because I was not laboring on my back. I was moving throughout
Right.
labor, like all the
Mhm.
things that you see could be risk factors for a
Mhm.
shoulder dystocia. I had none of them except for the fact that she was large. So they were unable to get her shoulders out at the house or on the way in the ambulance, which I knew they were pushing on my belly. It never registered to me that it was a shoulder dystocia at all. Like, I don't know what I thought. I just thought that, like, she's fine. Like, she still has her umbilical cord and she's attached to the placenta. Like, they get oxygen from there. Like, she'll be fine, right? And come to find out that is not the case with shoulder dystocia.
Mhm.
So we get to the hospital, and a bunch of people run over to the like bed that I'm on. They're wheeling me into a triage room, and immediately there is somebody on top of my body pushing down as hard as they can on above my pelvic bone, and another doctor, 2 hands inside, trying to pull her out at the same time. And they did end up breaking her humerus, and that's how they got her out. So I remember they pulled her out of me, and there was just, the room was packed with people. There was probably like 20 doctors and nurses in there. And they put her in the little like infant bed next to me, and I couldn't see her. I could just see her feet, and she was purple. And then I saw them doing chest compressions on her, and I was like immediately like, please save my baby, please save my baby, like freaking out. Like I think that's when it hit me that like my baby could die right now. Like, and she was born technically dead. She had no heartbeat, she wasn't breathing. Apgar was 0. They did resuscitate and they intubated her immediately and then they took her out. So, like, while they were still intubating and resuscitating, they were already taking her to NICU. And then I thought the worst was over from there. And then they put me into a different room down, like not the original triage room. And they were doing the fundal massages and all of that. And I'm like just so out of it at this point. Like, how is this even happening? My husband's freaking out. They wouldn't let him in the room with me at first. And then she pushes on my stomach and I felt like a huge gush. And at that point, I'm like, maybe it was my placenta. Like, I don't know. Like, nobody was saying anything. Um,
Uh,
my placenta had already come out in the last room. So they looked when I said that and they were like, we need to get the scale in here right away to like see how much this is. And they weighed it, immediately called the doctor. She came in and she was like, I need to stick my hand inside and sweep your uterus right now. And at that point, I was begging for pain meds because everything I went through was just unmedicated, like
right.
the whole time. And I was like, please give me something. Like, I
Yeah.
cannot do this anymore. And she was like, we should try without. Like, we don't have a lot of time right now. Like, you're bleeding out. And so I'm like, I don't want to do it. But she tried. I was screaming. She's like, okay, we can't do it. We're going to the OR right now. And at the same time, they're wheeling me to the OR. The NICU doctor's coming in and telling us that our daughter is not doing good at all. He's telling us the whole thing about how she was born completely unresponsive. They resuscitated her. She's intubated upstairs. He was telling us the protocol that they have when cases like this happen, lack of oxygen. And then I was in the OR.
Like the
So,
cooling blankets and going down the list of, how they're
yeah.
going to take care of her. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was just like, yes, do whatever you need to do. Like, I don't know what's going on. My poor husband, like, I can't even imagine what he was going through thinking this. Like, I was in such a state of shock, and he was like, I'm losing my wife and my daughter right now. Like, I didn't realize in the moment how close I was to losing my life until I saw the paperwork afterwards, and I was looking over all of the medical records and I had lost like 46% of my blood like
Oh,
throughout that. So they ended up putting in like a Jada, I think is what it's called.
mm-hmm.
So just like a very light vacuum basically to help the uterus shrink back down. Thankfully, everything was fine with the bleeding from that point on. As soon as I got out of the OR, they were like, oh, by the way, we did your blood work while you were in there and you have preeclampsia now. So then they were like, we need to hook you up to magnesium right now. You're on bed rest and seizure watch for 24 hours. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is crazy. I just wanted to see my baby. I was like, please, can
Right.
somebody bring me up there? And they were like, you can't, like, you're on seizure watch. Like, we can't bring you up there. And I was like so devastated. And I just remember that first night being just so terrible. I'm just sitting in the bed and I couldn't even really fall asleep because I just kept having like flashbacks and feeling like I was still in labor. So it was really rough. And at that point, we weren't told definitively that it was going in the direction of her passing away. We still had like a little bit of hope that the stuff they were going to do was going to help her. It was the next day that they came in and we asked them the whole time to be very honest with us. We wanted to know for sure. We didn't want like false hope or anything like that. And he was like, yeah, she doesn't have any like brain waves right now. Like if she doesn't improve in the next like 24 hours, odds are this is her baseline. So we knew at that point where things were headed, and we got 5 days with her before she passed away. And we had a really great day with her the day before she had passed away. So they had taken her off the cooling mat after 72 hours. So we got to give her a bath and take all of the electrodes and everything off of her that was not like considered a necessity to keep her alive. So it was great to just see her. And at that point, a lot of swelling had gone down. She was 12 pounds, so she
Well,
was a big girl.
that's a big girl.
Um,
And tell me her whole name.
Everly Mae Nerison.
Everly May.
Yeah. So,
Beautiful.
yeah, she looked so good. I remember once they got her off the cooling mat because she was able to get rid of the swelling and the fluid buildup, and we got to actually like hold her, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just a great day. They allowed our family to come in. Normally it's just grandparents that can come in, but they were letting like our siblings and stuff come and see her. So everyone got to hold her for like 30 seconds. The nurses would just like pick her up and set them in their arms, like right above her bed. Um, so that was a great day. Like we did skin to skin with her for such a long time. And we didn't know the next day was going to be when we had to say goodbye, but we knew it was coming. And unfortunately, it was up to us when that time was going to be, because the machines could just keep her alive as long as we wanted, and they would keep doing all these extraordinary things to keep her going, but we didn't want to put her through more. We got a call the next morning, so I'd finally been discharged at this point. And so we were at the house, like showering, getting changed and stuff. And I had asked the doctors, like, please call us if anything changes, because I don't want it to get to a point where we're getting a call of like, do you want us to resuscitate? Like, I did not want that. So she called and she was like, I just want to let you know we've had to turn her oxygen up a little bit. She's doing fine, but just so you know, like that is where her needs are right now. So we went over immediately. Again, thankfully, we're so close to the hospital. And we held her one more time, talked with the doctors about what the plan kind of was. Our hospital, we are very fortunate, has a suite that they just opened up. Actually, we were like one of the first people that got to use it. So when it's time to say goodbye to your baby, you can actually leave the NICU and you're in like a room that's just like couch and chairs and a little like kitchenette. Like it almost looks like a hotel room without a bed. Um, but just so you can be somewhere not in the NICU.
Right.
Um, so we had made the decision at that point. We could tell things were getting harder for her. And so we were like, okay, let's just take the time we can get with her. We went down to that room. They were able to extubate her, and we got to hold her with absolutely nothing on her body. Like it was so great. And they just told us they check in every hour until she passed on her own, which could have ranged from minutes to hours. You just never know. So they came down every hour, and she did make it like 2 hours before she had passed. So that 2 hours, my husband and I just got to sit there, hold her, pass her back and forth. We sang her songs and like everything. And it was really, it couldn't have been any better of a way to say goodbye to her. I'm so grateful that the hospital had that. That room also had a cuddle cot, so family members could come in afterwards and say goodbye to her as well. So we did that. Our family was already there, all waiting for us. So once she had passed and we chose to get her dressed in like little jammies, and then our parents got to come in, say goodbye to her. Um, and then they all left, and my husband and I just sat there for a little bit with her, and then yeah, it was
That is the most precious goodbye story I think I have heard, and I'm thankful that you got, knowing what was going to happen. I'm thankful that you got it that way.
yeah.
But how are you? Like emotionally and physically, you went through so much during this unexpectedly. You went from a home birth that everybody thinks is going to be, just the easiest because, hey, just have a home birth and I planned for this and I have a strong team, to having to be transported under the most unexpected, wildest circumstances to endure what you did. Tell me what was going through your head the first few days after this.
I was definitely in such a state of shock. At that point, I hadn't even digested like what I had physically been through. I feel like I was just so focused on like how did we come home empty-handed? It just felt so weird. Like I don't even know how to describe it. Like it was just very, very much a shock to me of how is this real life for quite a while afterwards. And I do think because of the way everything was immediately postpartum, my healing was definitely not as optimal as it could have been. It could have been way worse for sure, but I was walking too much, going to the NICU and just like sitting, standing, that my episiotomy was not healing. Like I could tell, like it didn't feel great. I was like, I feel like this is not healing right. Like, I don't know, but it eventually did heal. Like everything's all fine now. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that, you know, the bleeding wasn't worse. I kept my uterus. My uterus is fine. Like I'm still able to have more kids, and I know that is something to be grateful for.
When you start processing all of this out, and our brains do some really strange things, when we're trying to like put the pieces together and all of those kind of things. What questions did you have first?
I don't know. I feel like I was just living in this state of shock for so long. And every single time we would do something, it would be like worse almost to have to like come to reality with it. Like I wanted my husband immediately, like not necessarily just my husband, but somebody. I was like, I want her stuff out of our room. Like I couldn't look at it anymore. The bassinet could not be next to the bed. We closed her bedroom door. The car seat had to come out of our car. And it's like those things people don't think about. It's like you still have to, like, you have your whole house prepared for your baby, and then you have to like move it, like for us, it was more healing to have it not there than to be in our face the whole time.
Yeah.
I think my husband and I lived on the couch for like a week, and we would
Yeah.
just put on a show and try to like laugh for a second, and then we'd cry about her like a minute later, and it felt like every show had a baby or someone dying, or we were just like, we can't get a break. Like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Come on. And remind me again, Ashley, how long has this been from today?
So she was born in April, so it's been a
Okay.
little over 6 months.
Yeah, so still pretty fresh. Still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
And you have done a lot of education on TikTok. So you're on TikTok talking about your story. And I think that, when we go through traumatic situations like this, it's very healing to tell our stories. And we're doing it for ourselves,
Mm.
but we're also doing it, for others too. What are some of the first things you started, noticing when you were telling your story that were, raising awareness for other people?
I definitely think I found a group once I had shared that it was a shoulder dystocia. I don't think people really talk about a shoulder dystocia, and I got so many messages and comments of moms being like, I had a shoulder dystocia and didn't even know it until afterwards, or like, until I was pregnant the second time, and then the doctor told me, because it's such a range of like, you can have a sticky shoulder that lasts like 3 seconds, but it also, there's another side of the extreme. It's like my daughter was stuck for a long time because of the transfer to the hospital, and like her size was a huge contributing factor, but that's not always the case. Like babies can be 6 pounds and have a shoulder dystocia. And I think people just assume that like, oh, if I don't labor on my back, then I'm fine. And it's like
Right.
that laboring on your back doesn't equal shoulder dystocia. Like,
Right.
yes, there are things that can increase that risk, but it's like I did all the right things during labor, like moving, didn't labor on my back, like all this stuff and she was in optimal position. And sometimes that doesn't matter. Like, like shoulder dystocia can be really devastating. And
Mhm.
again, I know we're in a very small percentage of people that it's this extent.
Right.
Usually
Well,
your
and
baby's fine.
right. I mean, that's a huge nuanced conversation. And I'm so glad that you're talking about it because I see that too. And, small babies can get all tangled up in there too. It's not just, shoulder, it's like limb and, those
Mhm.
kind of things. And, when we talk about shoulder dystocia and the scary parts of shoulder dystocia, I mean, perfect example, of, hey, you had a larger than average baby on the much larger than average, baby. And, true shoulder dystocia and what that means. And which is the reason why I think more communication from doctor or care provider to patient needs to be a thing, because it is a spectrum. It is, yes, sticky babies, that's not true shoulder dystocia. I mean, even researchers, like when I'm researching shoulder dystocia and what researchers are talking about, they even say, the definition of shoulder dystocia needs to be defined better. Don't diagnose shoulder dystocia as, oh, okay, I had this baby that, needed to be a little bit manipulated to come out. True shoulder dystocia is from birth of head to shoulders as a minute long. And, the stickiness is, doesn't really need to be discussed, or it does need to be discussed depending on, the scenario and the nuanced conversation of the delivery process. So I'm really glad that you're talking about that. And so when, did you debrief with your midwife at all after all of this?
Um, you know what? I went for my 6-week postpartum checkup with a different midwife than the
Okay.
one who delivered me. And I basically just wanted her to check the episiotomy, to be honest. And it
Wow.
was not a great experience. I
Okay.
felt like a lot of my like things that I had to say were just like brushed off a little bit. Like she was trying to be too lighthearted about it. And I was like, my baby just died like 5 weeks ago.
Right.
And she was trying to just like, not like laugh it off, but just be like, oh, like it can happen.
Mm.
She was just making very not helpful things. Like she was not saying anything helpful at all. It was very upsetting. And honestly, after that, I was ghosted. So,
Really? Oh,
yeah,
I'm so
even the
sorry.
midwife that had actually delivered her didn't reach out to check how we were at the hospital. None of them came to visit us at the hospital. I think the midwife that delivered me, or tried to deliver me, she sent me a message on the patient portal like weeks later, just saying like, if you want to talk to me, like you can. I feel like I did everything I could have done. Like, I'm here if you want to talk about this stuff. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I don't need to. I don't find that would be healing for me. Yeah, like I don't think that would be healing for me to do. So I just didn't. And then yeah, I've never heard from them since. So
Wow.
it's
Well,
pretty shocking. Yeah.
how does that, yes, shocking, but how do you feel? Do you feel abandoned?
Yeah, I feel like especially from some of them that we thought we were closer to,
Mm-hmm.
I was just really shocked that we weren't checked in on more immediately postpartum. I'm like, you were our care the entire time, and not one time did you even ask, like, hey, can I come see you at the hospital? It's like my doula asked immediately. Like, she was there the next
Yeah.
morning to see
Yeah.
me and like to support me. And she never got to
Right.
meet Everly, but she was still like, I want to come and support you and see you. And it's
Yeah.
like, you couldn't even show up to the hospital and be like, sorry, like I don't know,
Right.
like just nothing.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely hurtful, and I
Ugh.
just hope that like obviously it's not happening all the time that people are losing their babies, but I hope it's something that they can learn from, and when they go
Mhm.
home afterwards are like, I probably could have handled that better, and I hope they learn from that and don't do this
Mhm.
again to somebody,
Yeah.
because it's very
Yeah.
isolating.
For
Almost makes
sure.
it feel like it's your fault, like that this
Mhm.
happened and they're like, "Oh, we don't
Mhm.
want any part of that." So
Right. Well, that brings me to say, how do you feel about home birth?
Yeah, I think on my TikToks, people jump to conclusions, both directions on I'm like still for it after all this happened, or like just making all sorts of assumptions. And I've said in a lot of my videos, I will never have a home birth again. It's just not worth the risk, even though it's so, so small of this happening again. It's just not worth it for us. And I still feel the same way that I felt about having a home birth. I still think all the pros that were pros for me to have one are still there and still valid. And I recognize that what happened to us was very rare, and it's unfortunate that her size was missed because I like to think that if they had known that she was, huge for her age,
Mm-hmm.
that we wouldn't have gone this route, that we would have
Mm-hmm.
been so much
Mm-hmm.
more on board the day before I went into labor when they were like, let's seduce you here. Like that would have played a huge part. But her
Mm-hmm.
ultrasound said that she was only in like the 56th percentile at her latest growth scan. So it
Yeah.
was just never even on the radar that she was that big. So yeah, because of all that, I see why people choose a home birth.
Mhm.
And to me personally, like, I'm never going to go tell somebody, like, oh, you should try a home birth, you know? But, like, if they have one, I'm like, I get why you're doing it. Just really, really make sure that your worst case scenario isn't like what I was thinking. Like, my worst case scenario was, okay, C-section or induction, like, or a really long labor. It's like, those are not worst case scenarios. Yes, it's still valid to be upset about if that wasn't in your plan, but it's not worst case scenario. So you really need to understand, and you need to search out the bad in home birth, because I feel like for me, I did all this research to find reasons to have a home birth, and I watched so many videos of people having a home birth, and it's like, how many times did I see a video of a home birth gone wrong? Like,
Mhm.
pretty much none, which is why I choose to share my story. And I've gotten so many comments and messages, people being like, thank you so much. Like, I was going to plan a home birth, and now after seeing your story, like, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, go you for making that decision, because
Uh-huh.
I've like
Mhm.
come to find out that you cannot make a truly informed decision until you've seen the other side of it. Like, you can't just search out stuff that fits what you want it to fit. You really need to dig for the negatives, which can be really hard in the home birth community. Like, I think especially online groups, it's really pushed out a lot. Like, people cannot share negative experiences with midwives
Right.
and with their home births, and they almost feel like you feel
Right.
shame for your home birth not going as well as
Yeah.
everybody else's. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to talk about it.
Right. Right. And talk about it freely, but and there's just such a nuanced conversation around it. Yes, there's a bad outcome, but why? The interviewing the midwives, going back to you don't know what you don't know, but, also in education from, our experiences that we go through. That's why we're good educators on things that we went through. Interviewing the midwives, going through the bad, like you said, search out what can happen, shoulder dystocia. How are we going to remedy this? Do you know how much continuing education do you have around shoulder dystocia? That's with OBs too. That's with midwives and OBs. Just because of your place to give birth, we can't like automatically assume that you being in a hospital setting would have been, now the outcome might have been a little bit different. Okay. But we can't, like, that's apples to oranges on the skill level of shoulder dystocia and how bad shoulder dystocia can be. Because every OB and labor and delivery nurse that I say, how do you feel about shoulder dystocia? Their heart sinks. Okay. So everybody has to be on guard with that. But interviewing your midwife, with each emergency situation of hemorrhage, shoulder dystocia, all the things that can happen with baby, how are you going to handle that? How are we going to work together to handle that? So it's a lot of conversation and a lot of research and a lot of, these things can happen, but also the numbers. I think the numbers and evidence and all of that matters on making an informed and educated decision on something that you can't take back. That's what your story tells people, like you got to be diligent on your decision-making process. And there's so much that we don't know. And I'm so thankful for you, for your strength and like literally the resilience that you exhibit on 5 to 6 months after and still able to articulate what you want people to know. That's a big deal, Ashley, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think, like you said, it's very important for people to ask more questions. And it's really hard if you've never experienced like a first-time mom, especially, but even somebody who's not a first-time mom, who's only had normal, good labors, it's like you don't know all the possibilities. And I wish that I would have asked more about complications, but I asked about hemorrhaging and I asked about like what hospital transfers would look like and what those situations are, what they're equipped with. And shoulder dystocia just never came up in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's like person to person, right? Like I said, there was 4 of them there, and the one that had practiced for way more years, it's like, how many shoulder dystocias have you encountered? Like maybe a couple, but the one that was there to deliver me that day, who had like, she was a CNM, she did all of the training, but she has only been practicing as a home birth midwife for like 4 years. It's like, how many shoulder dystocias has she seen? Probably way less, if any. And to this
That's a great
extent,
question.
I never would have thought.
Yeah, if somebody watches your TikTok or even mine when I talk about it, questions to ask your provider. If you are considering home birth, ask your home birth, yes, consider all the things that can happen. And do you want to consider those things? Just like the girl that's like, you know what? I don't know if I'm willing to do this. Yeah. That's real. Okay. Yeah. Because it's not to scare people into not having home birth. It's to, let the clouds part on the fantasy of home birth. Because we got to bring people down, but we also have to bring people up. You can't fear them into something either. So it's like, okay, let's erase the fantasy of what home birth can be, because I think that we really romanticize the idea of it. So the reality is these things can happen, but also the reality is home birth things can happen. So, there's that, but okay, taking in consideration these things, interviewing a bunch of people. Yeah. Again, you don't know what you don't know. Same with doulas. When somebody comes to me, I'm like, go talk to other people, do that. And then if they come back, great, we're meant to be,
Yeah.
I don't want people to come to me and say, everybody told me to come to you. And I'm like, it's not a good reason to come to me just because you've heard about me or just because somebody said, yo, Tracy does really good work. No, I want to fit with people and their need. Mm-hmm. Same with a home birth midwife. Drill them like you have never drilled anybody in your life.
Yeah, and if they're offended by you asking the questions, then it's not the right person to go with.
Amen, sister. Amen, sister. Because I have had midwives, because I mentor everyone. And I've had midwives that I've mentored, and they're like, Tracy, they're drilling me. I'm like, that's good. Mm-hmm. Answer the questions and answer with confidence. And if you're not good with it, if there's something there's not jiving, be honest about it. Yeah. Do not set somebody up to make them trust you and trust you under an illusion that you can do something just because, you want this birth or whatever that is. It's not fair to anybody. So one of those questions would be, how much shoulder dystocia continuing education have you had? How much skill training have you had? And you want somebody that's like, I got you, I understand that this is a spectrum, and hopefully that triggers in their head, how big is your baby? Mm-hmm. Right? So questions can bring up stuff that maybe they haven't even thought of, because maybe this practice, I don't know we're not going to talk about who these people are. We're not. And I've talked about this in my other podcast. We're just going to talk about the subject at hand, and I don't know if maybe the other midwives that had more experience were just, they were confident. So the people they were bringing in, they thought that they were doing, I don't know what their requirements are. When you are with a team of midwives, it needs to be everybody is on sort of the same track, as everyone else, in that, do you know what you're doing? And if you're meeting with a bunch of midwives in one group, how many skills days do you have all together? Like how many times do you get, and it should be at least once a month at least, they should be getting all together and doing hemorrhage skills and shoulder dystocia, drills and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very because when we go to an OB, we just call, we make an appointment, we sit down, and that's pretty much it, I feel like. And we need to do the same thing with them too. Like how much, if I have a breech baby, like, it's just such conversation that I'm trying to get people to understand too, that this is critical thinking, and it's not, this or that. It's, if you're considering home birth, let's consider that it's not all good, because things can happen, and it's not all bad, but we have to figure out what that bad thing is going to look like.
Yeah, and you can't live in like it's not going to happen to me, because everyone thinks it's not going to be them.
Right.
Like we never thought this was a possibility, but it happens, and unfortunately, like you have to be able to live with that outcome, when you choose that. So if you do choose a home birth, I'm so, so happy for all the people that have a home birth and it goes well, like I wish that was me more than anything, because I would have continued to have home births, but I feel so much more equipped.
Yeah, well, PTSD is real. I mean, if you're in a car accident, a really bad car accident, it takes a long time to get back into a car. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like, Ashley, would you ever have another home birth? I'm over here, would be shocked if you said yes.
Yeah.
Even if somebody said, well, what if you used a different midwife? It's different. That, like, it's not even that.
No, it's not.
It's not even going to a different midwife. It's the whole experience that you have to go through. And, to be honest, if you, have another baby and you are in a hospital setting, your brain is still going to do things that you're going to have to work through, husband, because you are having to have another baby. The environment really is like secondary to what healing has to bring, and the grace that comes with that. So I hope you give yourself space. And here I am already giving you another baby. What is your plans for that? Or, I mean, maybe I'm asking like way too early.
No, so for us personally, I wish I could have gotten pregnant immediately after. I just think that we wanted a baby so badly. Like I said, we struggled to conceive. It took us almost 2 years to conceive with her, and to not know what it's like to have a baby to bring home after going through pregnancy and labor was just more of a push. Like, I want a baby so bad. And I know that all of these lost moms, we all say the same thing: babies don't replace babies. Yeah. But it's just like, for some people, I think it's very healing to go through pregnancy and go through a labor and have your baby at the end of it. Is going to be, I think, so healing for us. And my husband feels the same way. I know that's not for everybody. Some people, it's the opposite. Like, you might never want to try again. Right. Like, and that's totally fine too. So yeah, we have reached back out to our fertility clinic. So hopefully we'll get the ball rolling for that. Maybe 2026 baby, we'll see. But I do feel like I'm ready now, that next time I go into labor, I'm going to be like ready to push, and like, all of you better come in the room. Like, I need like 20 hands on deck. Okay. Like, if it goes that way, obviously we're going to have much closer monitoring on baby's size and all that, because I didn't have gestational diabetes, but
maybe you just grow still
big. Yes, yeah. Right. So a lot closer monitoring on that. And if I have to have a C-section, I have to have a C-section. I know that's not worst case scenario anymore. So it's crazy how that changes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, one last question. So what would you, I know you do a lot of education on TikTok. What is the number one thing that you would want a family to know if they were considering just gonna give birth, but definitely considering a midwife and a home birth?
Yeah, I think, like we've been saying, is it's really hard to know what you don't know, but maybe just going in and asking them about all of the like not ideal outcomes that they've experienced. Like what obstacles have they experienced in different mothers' labors? And, if they're seeing this, definitely ask about shoulder dystocia. It can be so devastating, and not even if your baby is stuck for as long as Everly was. I have met so many moms now along the way whose babies were in a hospital setting and were only stuck for like 3 minutes, and their baby lost their life because of that, because it's just such a big range, like you're not guaranteed anything just because your baby was only stuck for a minute or two versus like 10 or 15 minutes. Like you could
Right.
still have the same outcome. It doesn't
Right.
matter, it's so different baby to baby. So
Mhm.
definitely just ask more questions about the bad outcomes. Even you might not want to hear it while you're pregnant and you might be in total denial, but it's so important to know about it. Like I wish I had known that shoulder dystocia was a thing when it was happening, because the silence that was going on around me and nobody telling me what was going on feels so detrimental to me now outside of everything, because I'm like, would it have been different had I known what was happening, right? Like, and I try not to live with like the what ifs, but I do think that if you're more
More
educated
communication.
on what can go wrong when it goes wrong, you can be like asking questions like,
Right.
something's wrong. And I think that the
Well,
goal,
that midwife should have been communicating with you, by the
yeah,
way.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think she was in such a state of shock. I truly don't believe she'd ever experienced something like this before. And when it was happening, like we could all see the shock on her face in our
Right.
room. Like she just
Mhm.
looked
Mm.
terrified. She was like,
Mhm.
oh, like what to
Mhm.
do? Like just, and you can train all you want on how
Mhm.
to handle an emergency situation, but when you
Mhm.
actually experience it, it's so much
Yep.
different than just having like the book smarts. It's
Right.
like
Yeah.
you have to be very
Sure.
hands-on and aggressive in a
Right.
situation like that. It's life or death.
Yeah. Yeah. I really 12 pounds.
Yeah. I
Really?
know. And I had no idea. People are like, oh, you couldn't tell. And I was like, no, I was a first time mom. I just thought that like you
Yeah.
got bigger, right? Like you're uncomfortable at the end. Like my fundal height was never measuring anything like crazy, week
Wow.
to week. And especially after we had the growth scan, like now looking back, obviously the NICU doctors were like, how did they get that growth scan so wrong? And people like to blame the midwives for that too. And I'm like, I went to the hospital to have all my ultrasounds. Like the ultrasound tech at the hospital and then a doctor at the hospital are the ones that were reading those results
Right.
and just sending them to my midwife. Like,
Wow.
so it's not that, like, it's not the prenatal care. Like, somewhere along the way, that was not on a home birth fault. It was
Right.
missed. And that unfortunately cost our daughter her life.
Well, I
So
am again thankful for you sharing today in your space, and Everly May is in her life, her short little life matters, and she matters so much because she's going to make it so much of a difference in other people's decision making processes in
Mhm.
life. And I'm just thankful for you, Ashley, that you're sharing your heart and your story. We're going to go, and I hope that whoever this impacts and touches will reach out to me or you, and we will just keep this ripple going. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me come on and share this and give a space for people to
Yeah.
talk about this and bring awareness.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Keeping Your Power podcast. I hope this episode reminded you that your feelings are valid and your voice matters. If this spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs to know that they are seen. You can connect with me at tracidoula.com or find me on social media at tracidoula. On the next episode, we will talk to two midwives who own their independent midwifery practices and hold themselves and those they work with accountable for their skill level and are upfront with their patients on what emergencies mean to them. I hope to see you then. Until next time, keep your power in the process.